Welcome, everyone, to the Live Ultralight Podcast, powered by Outdoor Vitals. This podcast is about inspiring you to get outdoors, showing you how to lighten your pack and build your confidence so you can start living your life full of adventure. I am Joe, and I am here today with
Tyler
and Tayson.
And we're going to talk about Tyler and Tayson's recent trip to the Appalachian Trail. Appalachian Trail and Appalachian Trail Days. Is that what the title is of that parade?
AT Trail Days. I don't know if anyone calls it. Yeah.
AT Trail Days. So Appalachian Trail Days.
Put two more trails in that and you probably got it.
Yeah. That's like ATM machine. When people say that.
Exactly.
What were you guys doing? What were you setting out to do throughout this trip?
We had two goals, really, to accomplish out there. One was to go out and see trail days, see what it's like, see if that's an event that we may want to attend if we can in the future. Just kind of get a grasp on that, get the cultural fit a little bit, too, out there. And then, after that, we were going to jump on the AT and do a 100-mile section. And that was largely in part to gain some empathy for what it's like to hike over there. So Brigham, which you'll find out, Brigham, part of the idea was for me and Brigham to do that since we're doing so much in design, just to understand how the gear performs there, if there's any differences, just to really feel like we can put ourselves on the AT when we're designing product as well. So we wanted to do a 100-mile segment there. So those were the two primary reasons that we, 2 days after the Grand Canyon, hopped on a plane.
I think there was a third reason as well, which is kind of what made us really want to focus on 100 miles there, and that was just that we're doing the UL Member 100 Challenge, where we're helping people to learn how to do a 100-mile trip backpacking without any support or help. And so we were able to do that section on the AT. We did a half day, 3 full days, and then another half day. So essentially 4 days we did 100 miles.
That's a lot of mileage.
Yeah, especially when I was kind of thinking about it this morning a little more. It was less than 4 days because we started at 3 and we were done by like 10 a.m. So like it was we did a lot of miles
like
in the 3
full days.
The 3 days that were like 3 full days were
big days.
Yeah.
That's really remarkable. I've always wanted to do the Appalachian Trail. You wouldn't let me go with you. There was some plans in the works to possibly do some photography over on the eastern side of the United States. If you see our media that we put out, a lot of stuff is near where we're at. We're in the Southwest. We're in Southwest Utah. And so there's a lot of desert, some like Rocky Mountains, higher elevation mountain stuff, but you never quite get that like East Coast greenery, like
everything
those older Appalachian mountains. You don't get that. And so there was a bit of me, there was a part of me that's very jealous and not too happy that I didn't get to go. I just wanted to confront you about that right here on this podcast.
Hey, wait. I'm pretty sure Derek calls the shots on your budget. So.
Yeah, he does. But you are the big boss. I feel like you can go over his head.
Veto power, I guess.
No. So it's really cool that you guys got to go and got to experience that. Have you guys done any hiking on the East Coast at all before this?
Pacific Northwest, but not the East Coast for me, really.
I had done a little. I lived in North Carolina for a couple years.
Okay.
So I had a good idea of what it was going to be like. I hadn't hiked much in the Smokies or like in Virginia where we were. But yeah, I kind of knew what we were getting into.
I have been, when I was a teenager, I was like up really late at night, and on PBS or something, they had a Canadian public television program that was a documentary on the Appalachian Trail.
Nice.
And so like pre-YouTube, like so there was a lot less people on the trail back then.
Yeah.
And I had been like pretty obsessed with doing the Appalachian Trail for a long time. I don't think I ever will at this point, but that was always something that like I always thought it was cool. Like, it was really inspiring to me. And then, like, years later, you learn about the Pacific Crest Trail and you learn about the Continental Divide. It's not the only one, but it is the most famous one. And the fact that we make gear here, that is basically our core audience, are people who are really serious about backpacking and want to lighten their pack so that they can do like lots of miles. So I think it's important from our company perspective, definitely, to get an idea from the eastern side of things, eastern United States, as far as what does thru hiking look like on that side of things. So take us through the whole trip. What was day one? Was that day
one was
trail days?
Yeah. So we basically got into trail days, and it was interesting. Damascus is a very small town. I feel like the population is in the hundreds, not the thousands, when the trail days are not going on. But it's right in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, so you're well placed, but the town's tiny. So we find some parking after driving around for a while, go over, and it was cool. It's very small. To me, I didn't know what to expect. I think Tyler expected about what we saw, but it's a little smaller than I expected. There's just, they do the pop-up tents. They've got some people there. But I think the coolest part of that was we had, some other manufacturers approach us, say hi. They clearly knew us, but then we just got to meet people that were stopping us that knew our brand. So, if you're listening to this and you're one of the people that stopped us at trail days and said hi and took a selfie or something, we appreciate that. We think it's fun. It's great to meet you guys. And so that aspect of it was fun too. But, I don't know. I mean, overall, I think it was just interesting to see the people and see the companies and just kind of how it was run. There's a lot of activities. And we kind of capped it off looking at watching the hiker parade before we hit the trail. But so it's like a celebration of the Appalachian Trail, and it has other manufacturers there. What is everybody doing there? Like, what kind of a meetup is it?
So it's nice because Damascus is right on the route of the AT. So the thru hikers are coming into town. They're probably spending a little longer in town, and a lot of them were trying to pace their hiking so that they could be in Damascus by that weekend. Mm-hmm. And that puts them at like the 450 miles in kind of range. I don't remember exactly what it is, but the idea is that, Damascus, like, as a town, they just really celebrate the AT. Like, you'd walk through town and see murals that say Trail Town USA, and cool. like lots of other cool little things. There's like some really well outfitted hiking shops there that have like just about everything you could want, other than Outdoor Vitals gear, because we're direct to consumer. but like, so the town just puts on this little festival, and a lot of it is kind of like a fair that you would see at a county fair, where there's just booths with hand-painted artwork and little crafts and knickknacks and stickers and clothing. But then there's like the vendor village, which is where like the big backpacking brands are. And
let's upgrade you halfway through the trail.
Yeah, exactly. So that's
a lot of people doing it too.
Yeah,
you'd be surprised.
Yeah, there's a lot of people ditching their 3-man tents for like a
jumping onto quilts.
Trekking pole tent.
That was one we heard a lot, or they've already run a backpack through or something, or decided that backpack wasn't working.
Yep. Darn Tough was there replacing socks for people and just stuff like that, So it was cool because the brands that are really focused on that style of hiking were fairly well represented there, and the thru hikers had a really good opportunity to compare products back and forth and decide what was going to work best for them.
That's good for the hiker, yeah, definitely.
But it's definitely like a celebration. They had all sorts of little mini events, and some of the brands were doing giveaways. It's just kind of fun. Supposedly, I offered Brigham $50 just to stay in Tent City that night after we separated off, and he refused it because apparently that's where half the party goes on too. So
they do it kind of like Euro style, where it's like tents are touching like you're camped so close in the grassy area that your tents are all touching, and it sounded like people just partied all night. And
that sounds like a great time. I know
that's not Brigham's.
That's not Brigham's style. Brigham's our product designer for those who are newer to the show.
We will go into detail, but it sounded like about half of the area was I could have managed. The other half was like
there was like a family
college dorm
area.
room. Yeah,
that you had to pay more to be in like the quiet family area, but. Like, had we known what our hotel was going to be like that first night, we probably would have stayed in Tent City.
Yeah, we pull up at like almost as after midnight, and I'm not even sure if the guy that put us in our room worked there or not. He might have just been a guy that hangs around the hotel. It was weird, and I'm pretty sure we saw guys hot wiring and stealing a motorcycle. Meanwhile, we had a decently nice car that I was like, man, I hope this doesn't get broken into.
I'm sure this is not normal Damascus, Virginia.
It wasn't Damascus that we stayed in.
Yeah.
It was a town a little further south.
I don't think Damascus even has a hotel in it or a motel. So we kind of stayed a little bit south. But anyways.
We were about 40 minutes south.
Yeah, it wasn't the worst sleep, but it was not the most.
The mattress kind of felt like you were in a hammock, but on a.
Should have used one of our Outdoor Vitals pads, and
I definitely traded out
the
weird pillow for our inflatable pillow.
Nice, nice. So after trail days,
well, we got to talk about the hiker parade, then trail days.
Okay, fast. Go ahead.
Hiker parade was crazy. People are going all out. Changing up their clothing to some pretty interesting clothes.
A lot of coconut bras and mini skirts and rainbow stuff.
Yeah. Trading out your shorts for dresses was pretty common, that kind of thing. So that was quite a sight, but it was really cool at the same time because the energy there is still really high. People just love it. And that was kind of an interesting clue, I think, for us as we were getting on the AT to what we were going to uncover as we got out on the trail that was so different from other trails. So anyway, we got, that was at 2:00. We were on the trail at 3:00 that day.
My favorite part of the hiker parade was all the locals line up with squirt guns. And then the hikers walk down the main drag through Damascus and get squirted.
Amount of people.
They get squirted by all the locals with the squirt guns, which was a fun thing. But then also the other coolest thing was it wasn't all just current through hikers who were in the hiker parade. There was a whole lot of people who were just visiting trail days to reminisce about when they did AT, when they did it. So there would be a lot of people who would be holding up little cardboard things that say like class of 72 or class of 88 or class of 2013. And it was just cool to see how many people came back just to go to trail days and walk the parade and be excited about the whole experience of the AT.
That's cool.
So,
yep. I don't know. I think it sounds like a good time. I would probably partied.
yeah. It was fun. We were
drag Brigham to Tent City.
We had the eye of the tiger though, because we knew we had to do 100 miles in 3.5 days.
Not only 100 miles in 3.5 days, but the fact that you just got off of
we didn't talk about that because the travel to this place was a little bit more expensive than we'd hoped. So we'd already bought Brigham's ticket, but Brigham in the Grand Canyon sustained kind of a knee injury that we were hoping would heal, but plane tickets already bought before Grand Canyon, and so essentially he came out, but he was not in any shape, and honestly still isn't, to do any kind of hiking. So it was kind of an awkward situation where it's like, well, I don't know what you're going to do for 3 days, but see you later, pal. And Tyler was probably in the best shape. He'd done some good recovery and was bouncing back pretty good. My calves were just barely untightening. Like they were so tight after the Grand Canyon, and I had knee pain as well. And I was kind of I was very concerned about that starting, that it would worsen. At best it stayed the same or got better, but that seemed pretty wild, going out and trying to do 25 plus miles a day that it wouldn't get worse. And so that was definitely top of mind for me, but we were out there and needed to make it happen. So like Tyler said, we didn't just hang around trail days too long. We kind of went through it as much as we felt like we could, and then hit the trail, which was, we literally started from where we parked the car in the middle of the city and took off to get as many miles as we could that day.
And to give a little bit of context, we did rim to rim to rim in the Grand Canyon. on a Monday. And so we did South Rim to North Rim down to Phantom Ranch, which was 38 miles the first day. Second day was back up out to the South Rim, which was another 10 or so. Then we went, so that was Tuesday, drive home Tuesday, get real stiff in the car, driving 5 hours home after that kind of mileage.
Don't remind me. Oh my
Then I have videos of everyone
Joe
waddling
in
into the restaurant too, which is funny. But then we had a little break, like we had Wednesday and Thursday break. Then it was Friday, flying and driving all day to get out there.
Yeah, when you live in Cedar, you start any kind of flying. That's like the latest I've flown out of Vegas, but we still met here at 5:30 in the morning a.m. So, and then you drive to Vegas, get on the plane, take 2 airplanes over there. By the time we got to Mountain City, ended our travel, like I said, it was after midnight. So a full day of...
With still stiff legs from the Grand Canyon, you know. So then Saturday, we spent all day on our feet at trail days, and then we started hiking at 3 in the afternoon after kind of hanging out. So like, there was not an ideal recovery window between the Grand Canyon and between the start of the AT, but that was just kind of how the scheduling fell, because
we got to turn back.
You got to have permits to do the Grand Canyon, to camp down in there. And then we had to pay for flights for AT, and they just hit in the same week. So people thought we were nuts when they said, you know, when we would start talking about hiking the previous week in the Grand Canyon and then being there.
Like, oh, you're from out there? I went to the Grand Canyon once. Hey, so did we on Monday. What? So anyways, we take off on the AT that day, and... I just out of curiosity, Tyler, how many miles and how many feet did we climb that day? You're going to have to...
I think it was right around 10 miles. We started at 3 p.m. Didn't take too many breaks other than water and stuff, and then camped up on a ridge. I think it was right around 10. And then as far as elevation gain, it seemed like we were climbing a lot that day, just like... up and then down and then back up, and so my guess would probably be like 1,500.
That's the famous thing about the Appalachian Trail, is that it's supposed to be, of the like Triple Crown, it's supposed to be the hardest one because it's continually up and down, and there's way more elevation gain and loss than on the other two.
Yeah, I think that's something that would be interesting to talk about, because and I think as we get farther in, though, I want to talk about that. But yeah, I pulled the numbers just as we were starting the podcast because I was interested. It was actually 2,800 feet of elevation climb in those 10 miles. So, I mean, it's funny. We met a guy later down the trail who's like, you actually did the AT right there? Everyone just walks on the Creeper Trail, which is this trail that just goes by the river.
The Virginia Creeper.
For like 5 miles and cuts out this 10-mile segment that's just straight up and down. So that was definitely the most climbing in the shortest amount of like miles. But yeah, it was definitely a lot of climbing. But yeah, almost 11 miles is what we ended up doing. And then we found a camp. And I would say it was really nice. It was quite pretty. We got kind of to walk by a river at times, or crossing all these bridges, which, you know, we're like, bridges aren't normal, you know what I mean? It's like a little creek, and they've got a whole nice bridge. And
people don't build bridges out here.
No.
Not like they do there.
So we really enjoyed it. It was a lot of climbing. And then we got into camp. We probably should have stopped a little bit earlier that day, because we ended up finding the camp spot we picked was a little slopey and stuff. But I would say the most memorable thing for me there was, man, the lights go out and the spiders come just climbing out. And there was so many spiders. It was insane. So
yep, we were in an undeveloped campsite, so we were just like, because we were getting rained on, and then it was getting dark like right at that time, and then the rain let up a little, and so we're just like, all right, we're throwing it down in the leaves, and it's where the spiders live, in the leaves.
Yeah. I mean, there's just more bugs there overall. Like, you don't have to worry about ticks nearly as much out here. Still are out here, but not nearly as much. And then there's chiggers. I don't know if you guys had to deal with those.
We avoided the damp, heavily shaded grass.
Okay. And yeah, there's just more life out there. I don't.
Yeah, we were pretty lucky that the bugs hadn't come in at full force. We were expecting a lot more bugs Didn't get as many bugs, just a whole lot
The
of
rain
sliders.
helped keep the bugs at bay, I think, and we were a little early in the bug season for my experience, so that was nice. We actually had great weather. Like, we got rained on pretty hard a couple of times, but it was great timing as far as weather.
Yeah, so one other thing to note here is we started the trail. My max carrying was just under 4 liters of water. So I started the trail with just under 4 liters of water. Was doing all this climbing with so much water. In fact, right before the biggest climb, we stopped and filled up more water. And that kind of started the learning path, which is the next day, we're like filling up with water, we're carrying water, we're climbing. And I think by the end of day 2, we finally learned that 2 liters of water is plenty out there. You don't need to carry 4 liters of water. Hardly ever.
Desert mode.
Yeah, we're coming from desert mode where we camel up and haul the water. And we definitely were carrying way too much weight the first basically 2 days, I'd say, before we started to dial that in. But yeah, day 2 was pretty awesome. We got up, hit the trail nice and early. Walked a little ways before we met up with a gentleman by the name of Boone, who he knew our brand. I think he had a few things from us as well, and kind of walked for a little bit with him, got to know him.
He was a contractor from Alabama, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, just out there making it happen. And so that was a really good time. And then we separated off from him and just kept trucking because we were headed, would have been this day, I think, towards Grayson Highlands that day. So we were kind of excited to get to that, but also just knew we had a lot of miles to cover. And I don't know if there's much more to say on that. I mean,
Boone had added 500 miles to his AT adventure, which was impressive because he did 2 trails through Alabama that then connected him to the bottom of the AT, and then
So he just walked from home to the AT.
That's what his dream hike was. So yeah, he was impressive.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So anyways, we climb up, and this is when it started to get good, because at this point we were probably 20 miles, not 20 miles, maybe 15 miles in, and we're like, man, a lot of this sure looks the same, right? Like, we're starting to like get that green tunnel, a little bit of it, right? Like, it was kind of early on still for us to be saying that, I guess, but eventually, though, we finally got up to a vantage point, because it seemed like every time I'd get up to the top of a hill, I'd like turn around and want to be able to see what we'd climbed, where we came from. It's just not the case, right? It's just so thick out there that you just can't see out of the canopy. So around 1 o'clock that day, we were able to climb up to Buzzard Rock,
yeah,
or something like that. And we stopped, had lunch, and it was just really nice to be in the sun and be able to see for a ways. It was really, really pretty. So had a really good lunch there, kind of sprawled out. I think I dried my tent out, or my quilt or something, and let it dry out just a little bit. Called home, which was nice. There's quite a bit of service out there, which we weren't expecting at all. We both brought InReach minis, and but yeah, had tons of service. Called home, and I got my legs burnt in like the 20-30 minutes we sat down. So my upper thighs were nice and red by the time we were done with that, and then we hit the trail again. So back on our way. We were definitely playing yo-yo with a few people on the trail, which turned into like a real big pattern out there, which was kind of comes into play, I think, too, as we got closer to the end. But went through that, went down, had another couple good climbs, and then got up to Grayson Highlands for that evening and had dinner on probably will be one of the most memorable like dinner spots, I think, that we've ever had. We're just perched clear up on this rock in the middle of Grayson Highlands.
The very highest point of our trip, elevation-wise. Could see a long ways.
Yeah, so Sunday evening, we had a group behind us doing a sermon up on the rock, and so we tucked off a little behind them and just kind of sat there and had our dinner and watched people approach these ponies. That they were so excited about these ponies. So there's ponies in Grayson Highlands that help. We later learned just that they're planted there and they help keep down some of the vegetation that they want. But the hikers love them. They were all chasing them around, trying to pet them. So we kind of had dinner and a show and an amazing view there. But
yeah, the pony thing is funny because it's the opposite of out here where we have lots of wild Mustangs and most of the ranchers and farmers absolutely hate the Mustangs because they eat like the grass and stuff. They pull up the roots and kill the plants and make it so that it's bad range for cattle and sheep. Whereas back there, they're saying the ponies like help with the environment, and we're like, well, this is different.
Well, it grows a lot faster out there, to be fair.
Yeah. So, but it was fun. That area was really, really pretty, and we kind of like got through it faster than I expected, really. So,
yeah, I mean, we were trying to, clock the miles that we needed to for the day. So we moved through there. And that's when we passed not our first shelter in the evenings, when people were starting to group up out of them. And so that was quite interesting as well. Because for us, Brigham, so I actually tasked Brigham with doing the research on this. I was like, learn about the water situations, learn about the camping situations, learn about the bear situations, and brief us on it. And so anyways, he's like, yeah, don't stay at a shelter. I've never stayed at a shelter. There's mice there, and there's more rodents and probably more bears if there are going to be any. That's where they'd probably be. Anyway, so on and so forth. So yeah, we pull up to that first one, and it is packed. And I mean packed. I think by the time we got all the way through it, we probably were up to like 45 tents at this shelter. And the shelter itself only sleeps like 4 people, maybe 5 if you
it seemed like there were 7 or 8 people packed into that one.
Yeah, that one was interesting too, because I'll say it. I feel like we, looking at the AT, it never really comes up, but there was a lot of drugs on the AT, which really was surprising. Walking past that shelter in particular, you could hardly see across the campfire. I'll just put it that way. It was intense. So, and there was a lot of tents as well. So 45 tents, they were just sprawled out. But why they do it is at the shelter, there's a toilet typically, and there's a water source nearby. So they can go filter water or get water. They've got a toilet, and then there's people there. And a lot of the people that head out there are doing this solo, right? Like a lot of them, or they start with a friend and their friend drops or whatever it is. And so it seems like even if they're hiking all day, they enjoy being able to stop in the evening where there's other people. I think there's some safety in it, right? Like not a lot of people like camping alone in the woods. So sleeping at a shelter almost guarantees that someone else will be around, and there's a little bit of safety in it. But yeah, I think there's also just a lot more socially happening in and around the shelter. So that was interesting, but I don't know if there's much to say there, but we talked to a few people there, and then we kind of scooted on through another 3 or so miles that night to get past the 25-mile mark.
Yeah, started to get rained on at the end of that day. So we were setting up camp in the rain as it's getting dark, which was not our plan, but we had already done dinner on the trail up in Grayson Highlands, so it wasn't like we were stressed about like having a place to hang out at camp, because that's not usually our style. So it wasn't bad. That was a good day. It was a good nice day.
Yeah, I mean, one quick little plug here too. Setting up in the rain and dealing with that. I had basically the newest 40th one-person tent, and it's really nice to be able to pitch it in the rain, not have any water get inside. But then because of that, we were kind of hanging out in our tents a little bit longer than we normally would. Usually be walking outside, and that thing is impressive how much headroom and space it has in there. Because of the spiders, I took my backpack inside of my tent every night, and then kind of pulled everything out of it, stuck the frame underneath my feet, and then had space for everything in there with a long, wide pad. So that was really nice. I folded over my pad actually and sat up for quite a while. I can't remember what I was up to, but
we were doing some recovery stuff, because at that point we were, right around mile 36.
Drinking my horchata. That's what I was doing.
Yeah, we like that.
Got some recovery horchata mix from scratch. That we probably have it on the website. Tyler would know better than me, but
I don't think it's listed yet. It will be soon.
So that'll be there. But yeah, that's always nice to end the day with a nice horchata, recovery horchata.
Yeah, we were just in there kind of stretching and doing all that. But
did everything feel like a spider?
Everything feel like a spider?
Yeah, well, you're in that too.
Not in the tent, no. I had a lot of
good.
safety in the tent.
That's good.
But it was more like when we sat down, took a break, you're just like, you always had our little 1/8" close cell phone pad to sit on. You never want to sit right in the leaves. If you ever stirred the leaves up, it was just like spiders coming out of them, you know. Or when we had to walk at night, you'd see spider eyeballs under all the leaves, you know.
That was funny.
You could see them reflecting back at you, but no, that was a good day. That was probably, I don't want to say the best day on trail, but like views and vantage points and just the trail itself was really good. It seemed like a lot of those people that made it to that shelter, they'd either left on Friday or they had taken the Creeper Trail and bypassed a lot of the 10 miles of climbing we did.
It was,
So there's a big cluster.
Yeah, all the hikers called it a bubble, but essentially what would happen is, and we were probably in front of a giant bubble, but because of trail days, hikers would all congregate at trail days, then they all get on trail at the same time.
Yeah.
And then you have a huge amount of hikers on the trail doing the same miles each day for a while until people's paces start to spread them out. And so we were kind of like just barely staying ahead the like early trail days visitors bubble, like the people who hung out at trail days on Friday and then hiked Saturday. So we had caught up to those ones and were hiking through those ones as we were going. Yeah. So I can't imagine what it would have looked like with the big bubble coming out of trail days.
No,
like that.
That would have been
insane. That would have been like kind of like standing in line on trail for like is what it would seem like because there were so many people.
Yeah. Yeah. So another good night of rest. Had some fun hanging bear bags. That was probably the most annoying part of not staying at a shelter was the bear hangs. Not a lot of trees with crossed over branches out there.
Like horizontal branches.
So it was always like you're dead tired at the end of the day going like, oh, do we have to go hang our bear stuff? And throw sticks in the air and about get hit by them and, you know, that kind of stuff. But no, so we got up the next day though, started off the trail quite early, hiked with a guy by the name of Sir Elton. He was a doctor out of Canada. So I talked with him for a while. That was really, you know, telling. And again, that was something I was trying to consciously do. I think both of us were trying to consciously do was engage with people that we were hiking by to learn, right? You're trying to gain empathy for the people out there, understand them, understand their needs, why they're out there in the first place. So we tried to be pretty social, especially when we're hiking, right? Because we didn't have enough time to just stop and talk to a lot of people. More so, we'd latch on people or people would latch on to us, and we'd hike together. So had a morning hiking with Sir Elton. Tyler wasn't feeling great that morning, but then we stopped and had breakfast and at another really good vantage point and probably the last like bigger view of Grayson Highlands before we really exited that area and kind of lost some of those bigger, more expansive views. So yeah, day 2 we did 25 miles, 5,500 feet of climbing, and then we started on day 3 this day, and first 4 or 5 miles had some views, and then it kind of got into just the thick of it. Walking, I don't know what there's to say about this day. We were cruising, it started to rain on us a little bit. We were kind of putting rain gear on, putting my rain kilt on, you know, just looking the part. People started to ask us what our trail names were, though. And around the office here, people have kind of bounced around between Wizard or Gandalf for me. And so I told the first guy that my trail name was Gandalf. And then we found out there was a Gandalf on trail that was a little too popular. You know what I mean? So decided to just go with Wizard.
Yeah, everyone was always looking for Gandalf.
They were always looking for Gandalf, so decided I didn't want to be Gandalf on the trail.
All right.
But no, I mean, I don't remember a whole lot to share. I mean, we recorded this in video, so all the some of the details I'm sure that we're scooting over will be in the video that will eventually get published on the
that'll be on our
channel.
YouTube channel.
That day we got rained on pretty hard from probably 10 in the morning till about 1:45 in the afternoon.
Is that the day that we took the brunt of the rain?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that was a lot of rain.
And it was raining hard, so much rain that noon came around and like 12 or 14 came around, and we're like, oh, mile 14 is the halfway point of our trip. Like, we should stop and film something and have lunch. We're like, no, we're not stopping.
We tried.
It was way, way, way too wet.
Tried to get our phones out. They were not cooperating. We couldn't even unlock the screen because everything's so wet. Yeah. And then I tried to get the GoPro out. It was malfunctioning, so we tried.
Yeah. So we just kept hiking. We hiked for a long time through the middle of that day. And one funny thing was they were saying that there was a river crossing and the bridge was out, and that you should only take that section of trail like at your own risk, and we're like, oh, cool. It's pouring rain. It's probably high water. Like, how gnarly is this river crossing going to be? And we get up to it, and it's like there was a lot of volume in the creek, but there was still good like rocks and logs to hop around on. So
nothing like a flash flood out here, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It was very manageable.
Yeah, so it was that portion of the trip was a pretty big grind because your feet are just totally socked through. We're still putting in a lot of miles, and it's just less comfortable to be being hammered with rain. We had good rain gear. We always have our stuff in dry bags, and we've got our rain jackets that we've been testing for about a year that are
coming up.
Yeah, they're coming out.
Stay tuned.
Soon. We actually just put the preview up on the members website today, so you can go check it out. But
so make sure you join the Live Ultralight membership. You can get discounts on gear. Tayson talked about the tent earlier. There should still be a discount up for you guys. What is that, through June or something?
Yeah, it'll be through, we haven't picked a date, but mid to end of June will be the biggest savings. So $65 off of each of those tents right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that rain jacket will be sweet. I mean, I don't know. I know we're not trying to harp on that, but there's a lot of really cool tech in it, and we got some really good. We've already tested it a ton, but this was just another good chance of showing how unclammy it is in those type of scenarios and how well it does at its job. So
yeah, so that rain was pretty rough. I think we got to like this road crossing at about 2:00 in the
Dickie's
afternoon.
Gap. I remember that.
Yeah. So we got there, and the rain finally let up, and there's like this little patch of grass, and we're just like sprawled out, gear everywhere, so that we can let it breathe. And that was probably my favorite lunch because it was just so needed.
This was also, so we started to kind of hike with a few people that day. There's a couple guys from Europe. There's a guy that we talked to quite a lot from Germany. He was a really cool guy. He worked in like the aerospace industry for their government.
In their space program.
Yeah. And just a really cool guy. I don't know if I remember his name or trail name off the top of my head right now, anyways, but we hiked with him quite a lot. He was a really cool guy. He got to know us a little bit, what we were doing out there, company and stuff. And so we played tag with him, but we kind of were laughing because it was like we powered through, didn't eat lunch till like after 1:00, and then this group behind us comes in, they stop, and it's these two European guys and a guy from Austin, Texas or around there, and he starts talking our ear off about stuff. He's pulling out all his lunch stuff, and next thing we know, his European friends are like, we're going, and they're just gone. And we're like, what the heck? And he's like scrambling, throwing his stuff in his pack to take off with them. And we just thought it was kind of a funny encounter. So then we started walking later with like the German guy and a few of these other guys. Started kind of asked them about that. We're like, because they were only going another 5 miles in the whole day to the shelter. And we were planning on doing still another like 10 or 15 that day or something. So we're like, why are they in such a race? Like it was weird. Like why wouldn't you stop? And because most of these people at this stage in the like they kind of get people separated out. You got the people who are doing 20 miles a day are already farther up the trail. You got the people doing this many miles, which typically they were doing about 16 miles a day. They were kind of, that's what most of the people in our area were doing, was 14 to 16 miles a day. Sometimes it was even less, but rarely would they go past 16. And anyways, we kind of asked them, we're like, well, what's the deal? Like, why are they like racing to the next shelter? And we never really got a solid answer. He's like, some of the guys were like, well, even we don't understand it. You know what I mean? Like, because there was one guy who hikes with those people. But I think it had to do something with maybe getting the best spot at the shelter.
The forecast, the weather forecast was still forecast for more rain and stuff. So I think that people want better campsites when it's rainy.
Or maybe you just want more rest time. You want to hike faster.
I think that was
They were
part of
cooking,
it.
man. They were cooking.
Yeah. They were hiking faster than we were, but we were doing more miles in the day, you know.
Yeah.
But
how many miles was that day?
So by the end of that day, we did 27.3 miles. And it was like our easiest elevation day with only 4,600 feet of climbing. So, I mean, it might be a good time to talk a little bit about the climbing there. Because coming from the Grand Canyon, I think what was the most unexpected is how much that beat us up versus these hills especially. It was polar opposite. And the reason why I say that is most of us, and me especially, I can definitely talk for me especially, is that on the descent of the Kaibab Trail in the north rim of the Grand, or south rim of the Grand Canyon, it was very steep, very technical, lots of logs. You basically are having to like pinpoint where your feet were going, land on like the ball of your foot, the toe of your foot, and then you're doing that for 7 miles. So you're not landing flat-footed, you're not landing on your heel.
You're doing
like
a calf raiser every step, you know.
Like, but then you're taking the brunt of the downhill energy.
It's like 5,000 feet of decline
down,
just on the
boom,
one
shot. Yeah, 7 miles of that, and that like blew some of the guys in the office, including my calves. It just kind of blew them up. Where you got to the bottom and realized, like, hey, weren't even running that fast, but I'm feeling it, and I still got 30 more miles. Compare that to this, where typically your biggest climb, it wasn't our biggest climb, but typical climbs ranged between about 700 and 1,000 feet of elevation. But your way lower elevation levels, like so if there's way more oxygen compared to what we're typically used to, and doing that amount, it was like you'd get working, you know, but you had tons of oxygen, which helped you. So we never had to slow down on any of the hills, and we could talk up every single hill. Even the steepest one, I kind of noticed to see if Tyler was going to stop talking on this one because it was the steepest one that we've done.
There was no switchbacks. It was just like straight up this steep hill.
And like he was able to talk the entire way up the hill, which is not common in Utah. A lot of times you'd have to stop, breathe, hike another 100 yards, stop, breathe, because there's just so much less oxygen. But so yeah, typically though, 700 to 1,000 feet of climbing, and then you go down the other side. And doing only like those shorter increments, way more forgiving on the legs. Like way more forgiving on the legs. It did not feel on any of these days, in my opinion, like we climbed 5,000 feet or 6,000 feet compared to what it feels like when you hike 6,000 feet of elevation out here in the West, because typically just long climbs for like 4 hours straight, and you're just killing your muscles. So
there's a couple of other factors in that. Like we live at 5,600 feet above sea level, and the highest point we reached on the trail out there was 5,400 feet. So we had an advantage there. But then too, the trail conditions on the AT is generally quite nice. Like the trail is really worn in.
How do you put it? The AT is not about getting from point A to point B. It's about taking the most scenic route you can possibly imagine from point A to point B.
We joked that they really get their distance out of each hill because they kind of like wind around each hill, and then you're like, when you're looking out, you're like, oh, weren't we just on that hill?
In Grayson Highlands, we did a massive circle.
Yeah.
You know, and you get back and you're like, it's like a mile. We just hiked 5 miles to get a mile.
Yeah. So we
probably going around private land or something.
I think it was also just because it's a pretty area, you know, like that's kind of like a scenic area of the trail.
Yeah, and the other thing is like when you look at the AT, and you look at like how the trails originated back in like colonial times, the most direct routes from town to town or through the mountains are now highways, right? So the actual AT route is just they had to.
It's pure recreation.
Yeah, they had to make some connection trails and like make it all work, to get through there. And so like we didn't mind that because we were there for the experience. It was just different.
Easier.
Yeah,
you got switchbacks, not as steep.
Yeah, but I think the other thing is like part of the reason we felt really good doing all of that climbing was just because we've been training a lot. We've been trail running a lot, and before the Grand Canyon, we had both been kind of in that like 30 miles a week of trail running range with elevation gain added in.
I was hitting about 6,000 feet of elevation climb per week in those training sessions too. I started to ramp up my elevation as a part. That's one of the things I track is miles and elevation. So I'd been pushing that up. But yeah, it definitely helped out there, even on very tired legs and sore feet and stuff like that. The hills really didn't knock us down too hard, even though I'll tell you the number at the end. We climbed a lot of elevation. So anyways, day 2, we hike up. We get to a little turnout where there's a shelter. I don't know if we need to tell that story or not.
Well, that was day 3. That's day 3 on the trail.
You're right, day 3 on the trail.
And by then we had passed the 500-mile mark on the AT if you're going northbound. So a lot of the hikers were kind of talking about that, and that was cool. You know, that's a big milestone for any hiker to have done 500 consecutive miles, and so that was cool to hear people's like how they were feeling about being there at that point. And we got the feeling that like the people we were hiking with were like the ones who were going to make it like the whole way, you know, because they had time to work through their issues. Almost everyone we talked to had to work through pretty big issues to make it that far. Like they either got sick or had foot problems or had something else and so they all had these stories of time that they had to spend off trail, like in a hostel or a hotel or a hospital, in order to get to where they were. So that was fun because we felt like we were in really good company, just getting to know really capable people and hearing really interesting stories. That was where we met Turtle.
Yeah.
So
we had an experience where we had to help one of the thru hikers figure out which direction she was supposed to be hiking, and then after that we were hiking along, and there's this kid that we passed, and then I was trying to gap him a little bit so we could stop and do some shots because we walked across this meadow. So I set the GoPro up and we were doing like a walk by shot, and he comes over the hill. And I'm like, oh, I bet we just freaked him out because we turned around. We're both dressed in the same color of shirt, running shorts, same backpack. I think we even had the same backpack color, even though they're and so people looked at us and they'd be like, what's going on here? And we'd be like, oh, we work for a company. Some of them, we'd tell them that we were the Mormon missionaries.
Trail missionaries.
And they believed us. But yeah, we kind of had like a uniform look for sure. So it was funny because, Turtle comes up over the hill and we both turned around on the trail and we're purposely walking right at him, and then anyway, so we go a little bit further, we stop at this water source and he stops too. And so we start talking to him. And, he was just this 20-year-old kid out there. He'd already finished a degree, an economics degree, and it was kind of like his time to, how would you phrase that?
Decompress?
No, like he was looking at completing the AT as like a
rite of
coming
passage.
of age.
Yeah, coming of age thing.
Kind of thing. He was really focused on doing it and proving to himself and to everyone else that he could do it, it was pretty cool. He was out there alone, he had a friend that started with him that couldn't quite make it, and so his friend ended up getting off trail, and then Turtle was just out there like doing this on his own. He was, I'm pretty sure, the youngest person that we met on trail that was doing the whole thing.
Yeah, and so we kind of basically he's just latched on and he started hiking with us that day, and we were just swapping stories. We're asking him about things, he's asking us about things. He might be asking us about gear. We're asking him about like, what are you eating out here, and stuff like that. And he probably had the worst eating habits that we'd heard. He told us stories of like packing around 12 cans of Vienna sausage for like 100 miles, and then he's like, I didn't want to deal with the trash, so I just ended up leaving them anyways for someone else.
Yeah, he literally told us the trash was so annoying to deal with that he only ate 2 cans, so he carried 10 full cans for more than 50 miles before ditching them, which he just left in a hostel, for a cleaning lady, he said. But
he mainly lived on Jolly Ranchers. He's like, anytime I start to feel hungry, I just eat a Jolly Rancher.
Sugar.
Yeah. He's like, I just go into the store and I just look for the stuff I wanted as a kid. Gushers, Jolly Ranchers. We're like, oh, yeah.
He talked about eating peanut butter and gummy worms on tortillas. That was like...
Together?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty good.
So...
Well, at first I thought it sounded crazy, but then you're like, wait, the gummy worms act as the jelly.
It's like a jelly, yeah.
I'd try it. I bet that would be Derek's favorite food on
Did
trail.
you find anyone who did what I told you, what I've heard of is the jar of peanut butter, and they take a stick of butter in the jar of peanut butter and they mix it up?
We didn't see
For
that.
like super high amount of calories.
We didn't eat a lot of meals with people. I would
Like
say.
when we
mainly
did
just
that.
hiked with them, but we did ask almost everyone what they were eating because we were curious, and we learned that a lot of people are they're asking their bodies to be athletic, and they're feeding themselves like they're a 13-year-old kid eating junk food.
And it wasn't fair for us to judge too hard or for us to tell them what we were packing, because like we were looking at this like we're doing a 100-mile sprint, so we're gonna we both wear the Garmin watches that tell us how many calories we burn when we run and hike, and so we're like, okay, we're gonna be burning 8,000 calories this day, we're gonna pack 4,500, and we're gonna get like all the best things. And so like we were going out there,
we have access to a lot of really good food here that we retail, like honey stingers and scratch.
So like we sat down with Turtle at dinner time because he wanted to just hike with us as long as we could. We enjoyed his company and he was enjoying talking to us. And so he was like, yeah, I'll camp with you guys tonight. So we sit down for dinner, which we do this almost every time. We have dinner around 5 or 6 in the evening with 3 to 5 miles left in the evening, because there's a few reasons for that. It, like performance wise, it makes way more sense to get those calories in earlier and finish the miles without as much of a deficit. Like if you starve yourself from 3 in the afternoon till 8 or 9 when you finish your hike, you're just not going to feel good that night or the next day. So we do that, but also we like to have dinner out on trail at golden hour when you can see wildlife, you see the prettiest, time of the day. And so Turtle wasn't really used to that. He was used to eating dinner like at camp late or whenever he gets to camp. So we're like sitting there fixing up our peak meals. No, Tayson had his
I had my homemade one.
His homemade
super good.
What is it? The
Zuppa Toscana. Yeah.
The soup, yeah.
Soup.
So Tayson was like filming a video about that, and I'm like chowing down on this big peak meal, and I look over at Turtle and I was like, are you gonna eat dinner? And he's like, I had a Jolly Rancher. Like he's literally sitting there like talking to us, and the only thing he had was a single Jolly Rancher.
I was trying to give him food.
Was he like rail
just
thin?
take food?
He said he had lost about 15 pounds in those first 500 miles. He wasn't crazy thin, and he did say he was going to have Pop-Tarts when he got to camp. So we gave him some food and stuff.
At camp he finally started taking some food from me.
Yeah.
We adopted him.
Yeah.
It was like a stray out on trail or something.
That was one of the things that we came away from the trail like learning the most about and still talking the most about is like the food situation on the AT is hard because you're trying to budget a finite amount of money for a really, really long 2,200 miles, right?
Yeah.
So you're trying to make your money stretch, but you're also trying to act like an athlete, and you're fueling it with junk. And so we were really curious to talk to like everyone we talked to. We asked what they were eating, and Turtle was on the extreme of the one side. We were on the opposite extreme. A lot of the people we talked to were kind of in the middle. Like they were paying attention to getting a balance of fats and carbs and proteins, and they're
trying for sure.
Yeah, so
I think the biggest thing Turtle ate was his family or someone sent him protein bars, and so he'd eat like 1 or 2 of those a day. But I can't imagine.
He said he was packing salami too, which is Joe's go-to
we know someone
on the trail.
does that.
Yep.
That was good because he needed it too. Like he needed some protein and fats, and that's a good source of that for him. But
yeah,
so I think there's some lessons here that we'll get into the next day too about like hiking some of these longer days as well. But so I ended up packing up, finishing that hike. It was really pretty. Found a good camp spot.
Best camp spot.
It was probably was. It was kind of by a dirt road, and so we had some solar lights in our camp, a tiki torch. didn't feel like we were like out in the mountains so much, but it was.
But it was
nice.
the best to me because we were up on a high ridge. We had a good little breeze.
There was humidity.
There was zero condensation when we woke up. Like, just because we weren't... Usually
Stuff
when...
was drying out.
People don't realize the majority of their condensation comes from being in low, wet campsites. So, like, if they're camped next to a water source, they're going to have a lot of condensation. If they're in a low area with very low breeze or something like that, they're going to have more. So we really enjoyed that camp spot because of that.
We even got into camp at a pretty decent time, kind of sat there for a little bit, eating, snacking a little bit. Yep. One of the easier bear hangs, probably. That was a good evening. And Turtle pitched. He had a hammock, and so he slept there with us. And then the next morning, he wasn't about getting up at the hours.
we told him, like, okay, what time are you getting up? Because we're going to get up early and put in another 27 miles. And he was like, how early? And we're like, we'll probably wake up at like 5:45, right as it's getting light. And he's like, nope. And so we're like, okay, don't be offended that when you wake up, we're just going to be gone. Like, it was fun hanging out, but we're out of here. And so he was fine with that.
We asked him, we're like, how late do you sleep in? And it sounded like he woke up usually between about 8 and 10. But it was quite interesting because there was a group, definitely the younger group on trail was waking up, it seemed like, at those hours. But then there were times when we were like just waking up in our tents. And there were guys passing us on trail. These usually it was like the guys that were retired from their jobs and they're doing the shelter races. But the guys that are like in their 50s, 60s, early risers, they get up, they get those miles out early. And I've always been more of that crowd too. But obviously when you're doing big miles, you kind of have to burn both ends of the day.
I think if I were on there, I would just, whenever my body decided to wake up, when I would wake up.
We didn't even say this, but on start of day 2.
Which one?
Well, remember waking up? We had quite the alarm clock. We had birds just ripping our tents apart with noise, it felt like, and then all of a sudden we had turkeys gobbling next to camp at like 5:30 a.m. And it's like, well, we're up.
That was the morning of day 3.
Yeah. So that was first bird encounter. Just super loud. But anyways, so we get up, we'll leave Turtle, and keep going. So we finished that day with 27.3 miles and 4,600 feet of climbing, and started this next day, which was going to be our last full day on trail.
We hiked with a couple of older guys. One was there. So there's the trail family thing where people kind of like link up and hike together and do things together and share resources. And I really wish I could remember the German guy's name.
Oh, yeah. I meant Chip later.
But yeah, so the German guy was one of the few people who had a hard deadline for his AT hike because he had a visa to be in the U.S. So he had to be done with the through hike by September 1st so that he had 2 days to get on plane and get home. And so this other guy was trying to catch up to him because he had just decided, okay, I'm going to hike with the German guy and I'm going to finish at the same time as him. So they're forming a new trail family, essentially, and they were getting after it. Like, they knew that they had to average 16.7 miles per day for the rest of the time in order to make it by that date. And so we caught up with him and hiked with him for a couple of hours talking about just their goals and stuff. And it was interesting because 20 miles is like kind of the biggest threshold that most people do on trail per day out there. And he had just done his first one the previous day. So he was kind of like wondering how he'd be feeling and all of that. And we're like, dude, you're hiking fast. Like he was really moving because he was trying to catch a shuttle at a visitor center that we were going to pass. And so that was actually where we saw the craziest shelter on the whole trail. It was like a mansion, but it was the shelter was like kind of part of the visitor center thing, but it had like a shower and super fancy log cabin shelter thing. But that was just an interesting morning. That guy was hiking a lot faster than we would have hiked. But we
talked a lot to him about backpacks. He was really interested in the backpacks we were using, and it's probably a good time to just interject something that we saw on trail a ton. That was a big takeaway, and that was that people really don't know how to use frames of backpacks, and a lot of them, like, their frames are just null and void by the size of the frame. So, we're seeing a lot of packs out there. You can tell a lot of them are probably, like, they're not weighting them right. They're putting heavy things on the outside that probably should be closer to their back. But the biggest thing was, like, we're a big fan of having a frame and using your load lifters, because after even just a couple days, that bag will really, really start to feel heavy, even on day one. But that was just a big thing. So we were kind of talking to him about it, because he had a pack from one of the biggest pack manufacturers out there, one of the most common ones, and
for ultralight packs.
Yeah, and the frames on them are so short that you can't even get them above your shoulders, and they don't even put load lifters on the backpack, because what's the point if the frame's not above your shoulders? You can't get a load lift. But if you haven't seen our video about how to wear a backpack correctly and fit it and things, definitely go check that out. If you know the name of that, Joe.
You're wearing your backpack wrong?
You're wearing your backpack wrong.
You guys made me be the dummy.
Yeah, Tyler was the mannequin in that one. But yeah, fit your backpacks right. Get backpacks with load lifters, with frames that are 22 inches or bigger. It really makes a massive difference. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot different between a frameless and a framed backpack. If you got a frame that's 18 inches, or your backpack doesn't even have load lifters, those types of things, it was nonsensical, the amount of people that we saw like that. And honestly, about the only ones that even did have like any load lift going on were the people with like Osprey backpacks, because they're just really a lot bigger. Usually those were like 60, 70, 80 liter packs, and so you could tell they weren't ultralight guys, but at the same time, at least their frames were big enough that they could get a load lift.
And those were the minority as far as packs being used on the trail. A lot of the ultralight brands were way more popular than Osprey out there, it makes sense, but at the same time, if you're not using your ultralight pack the best, or if you choose one that doesn't have a tall enough frame or any load lifters, then you're not doing yourself any favors.
Or you buy an ultralight pack that doesn't have the support of a bigger pack, and then you cram it full like it's a big pack that has a full frame system in it. Like, that's something a lot of these guys had these ultralight backpacks looked like beach balls on their back. Like, they're just these big round hunks of thing, like, clear down their back, and looked incredibly uncomfortable. So it was actually interesting, because we talked to that guy about it a lot. And then another mile or two up the trail, we meet a guy named Chip. That was his trail name. And Chip kind of latched on to us. In fact, we crossed paths with him right as we were crossing paths with this lady who stopped us and said, "Hey, I know who you guys are. Can I take a picture with you?" And she's like, "Yeah, I hiked it, northbound last year. I'm hiking it southbound this year."
Wow.
And yeah, she was getting after it for sure. And so then Chip was like, "Oh, I thought I knew you guys." And so then he kind of latched on and started hiking with us that day. And the interesting thing is when we passed him, he was going super slow. Like, not super slow, but he was going quite slow. But then he latches on with us, and he's just keeping pace with us the whole time and talking with us the whole time. And that was very common, actually, which is kind of an interesting thing. But one of the questions that he brought up to us was, how do you guys hike 20-mile days? We were doing 25 miles a day. But, to them, like I said, all of those guys' goals was to get to 20 miles a day. They wanted to get to the point where they could hike consecutive 20-mile days. And that was a really interesting thought exercise to kind of talk through with him. And I'll give a few of them, and Tyler, you can give a few of these, but one of the ones we already talked about a little bit, to hike a 20-mile day or more, to me, really means you plan your day accordingly, which typically, and Tyler's not quite as big of a fan with this, just for his gut, doesn't like it as much, but what I'll typically do is I'll wake up, let's say we hit the trail at 7, we'll wake up at 6:30, and then we just pack up camp super quick, we get on the trail by 7, we hike about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, so you log, between 2 and 5 miles, and then you stop for breakfast at like 8:30, let's say, or 8. Have breakfast, you hike another couple hours, you maybe take another little break, hike another 2 hours, then you stop for lunch, hike another 2 hours, then you stop for an afternoon break, hike for another 2 hours, you stop and have dinner, hike for another 2 hours, the day's done.
And you've done 25 to 27 miles.
Yeah, and if you break it up like that, it's way less than hiking 6 straight hours, have a lunch break, 6 straight hours or something like that. It makes it feel a lot less. Getting your feet up in the air for even 5 minutes can really make a difference. And
that's the thing is, like, for the breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we're taking 45-minute breaks, so we have time to take our shoes off, air out any gear that got wet, just like have a real good rejuvenating break.
I would say it feels like 45 minutes, but I bet if we clocked it, a lot of us were 30 minutes even. And that's still pretty rejuvenating. One of the first things to do is sit down, take our shoes off, get comfortable, and then start making the food that we're going to eat. But also, doing it this way can help you eat properly on trail, which is kind of one of the next tips that we had for him was, we talked to all these people and no one's really fueling their body right. And fueling your body right goes into a lot of things. Fueling your body right means less risk of injuries. Maybe helps you deal with an inflammation, or maybe your body can actually recover correctly so that you're not just beating it down day after day after day, but you're giving it the building blocks that it needs and in the structure that's needed, which is, me and Tyler eat a lot of snacks on trail. You got to keep those calories coming in consistently, because you're burning, 400 calories an hour or more, 800 calories or more an hour sometimes out there, and you're trying to replenish at least half of those as you go. So that consistent drip of calories is very helpful. So if you kind of structure your day like that, that's helpful. Or, packing your little snack bag and having that accessible. Like, basically every time we stop for a meal, we're repacking the snacks and the things we want accessible so that we can eat as we go.
Yeah. The only reason I'm not a fan of the schedule that Tayson put out was because I feel like if you, and this comes from my mountain biking, racing kind of experience, if you start the day with a calorie deficit, you have a hard time catching up energy-wise throughout the day and performing your best. So usually what I will do, because I do like the routine that we described, is I'll just try to eat something while we're packing up camp, and then I'll have second breakfast when we stop. And so, like, doing that allows you to stay ahead on calories, get those complex carbs that you need in that will start helping you to have the energy longer. But I really like that routine, and that's why the dinner really works well, is because you are getting calories when you need it, and then you're finishing your last 5 miles without having to wait for dinner. And so that's part of it. It's a little, like, as far as 25 miles goes, that may just be too many miles for a thru hiker, because they're just not going to be willing to spend as much money on food as we did, or pack as much food as we did, But 20 miles, I think, is really doable if they're planning and working on it. The other thing is, I feel like we spend a good amount more time on recovery and stretching than most people do. So when we get to camp, we'll sit there and roll out knots in the muscles with our trekking poles, or sometimes I'll just sit down and roll a rock under my foot, like find a nice round golf ball sized rock and just work out little crunchies in the feet. And then we just make sure that we're stretched and doing that muscle recovery, so that when you're stacking big days, it's not an issue.
Yeah, I think day after day after day, things just start to get amplified. So if you don't hit them early with recovery, they're just going to get worse. And so we're pretty conscious. I feel like I try to be very conscious of my body, anything I'm feeling, and try to react to it if I feel like it's something that could build. One of the other things that I would say that makes a big difference is hydration. We're going to be putting out a video about a sweat test here soon, but people really don't understand how much hydration matters to the body. You can always go and eat more food and have that get into your system pretty quick. But if you get at a hydration deficit, you can get in a really bad position really quickly. And along with hydration comes salts and electrolytes, right? And so if you are underhydrated, your body is basically running at a deficit all the time to repair itself, to flush things out of its system, and like people talk about like the blood is like your blood is like the lifeblood of your body and stuff, but water's, I don't remember what percentage of the body, but it's like 90% of the body is just water, right? So it's like, I think people really, that's one thing that will help them day after day after day, because if you get dehydrated, let's say in a day, you're going to feel like crap, you're going to feel like stopping, and most people catch up on hydration sitting around camp doing nothing. But if you don't ever get to a hydration deficit, your body can continue to work and function, and then when you get to camp, it can repair itself better through the night, flush things out that it needs to, and just it's like keeping good oil in your car at all times, instead of letting it get down and start to create engine damage or something. So,
and the salt is a lot bigger deal than people give it credit for, I think. Salt helps regulate bodily fluids. It helps regulate nerve function. So people who are getting headaches on trail, or they're getting cramps, like that's from the lack of salt, not necessarily always just the lack of water, because people may be getting enough water, but if they're not replenishing that sodium, they're going to have nerve issues, muscle issues, cramping issues, blood flow issues, which will then lead into extra or extreme soreness, or they're not going to flush lactic acid. And so that's like all hinges on getting enough sodium back into your system as you're sweating it out.
Yeah, in the UL Member 100 Challenge, we've got some guiding principles in the framework that those that are part of that will be able to see. But just a kind of a high level example, I won't go into like how much salt and stuff like that right now, but in the Grand Canyon, I'm an incredibly salty sweater. Me and Brigham are very salty sweaters. I think there's some good footage of Brigham.
Yeah, there is.
They have like 1/8 thick salt lines on their clothing. It's nuts.
Yeah, but in the Grand Canyon, I was trying to drink as much as I could and hydrate as much as I could. I was very conscious about it. But at one point in the day, I just realized like I'm going to the bathroom way too frequently, and it's way too clear per se. And so I kind of realized like, it's like I need to be drinking this much water, but it's not sticking. And so I took basically some big hits of salt really quickly. Suddenly my body was able to retain the water that I was giving it, and I felt way better the last like 2-3 hours of the day after I took that big hit of salt. Because I was already taking salt the whole day. But I mean, on that day, I drank 12 liters of water in the Grand Canyon. Now that's quite a bit above average, but still on trail, people definitely underhydrate. But that's the kind of stuff that day after day after day hiking will start to compound, and it'll knock you right off of a 20-mile-a-day schedule. So
yeah, and not all electrolyte packs or mixes are created equal. You have to really look at the sodium content, and there's a lot of people who only drink when they're thirsty, and I think that that's kind of wrong. You need to drink based on effort, not on thirst or desire. And by the time we get done with these long, big mile days, I'm pretty dang sick of drink mixes and all the snacks that we carry. But it's a necessary part of doing that much mileage, So there's a lot to that. There's a lot to experimenting with it. And if anyone's really interested in the science of it, we can point you in the right directions. You can just send us an email and we can help with that. But
yeah. So taking us through the end of this day, we hiked with Chip for quite a while. He got to his mileage goal for the day, so he stopped, and we kept going forever.
Yeah, he stopped at a great campsite.
It was good.
And that was like at mile 23 for us in the day, right?
Yeah.
So we went another couple miles, and we were thinking like, okay, we were kind of planning backwards for the last day. We're like, okay, we need to be completely off trail by 11. We've got to find a place to shower. Then we've got to be at the airport in Charlotte by, whatever time. So we're like, okay, we have to be done by 11. So it's like the more miles we can get in tonight, the better. That will allow us to like maybe have to hunt kind of hard for a shower. We would be real embarrassed if we had to get on the plane.
Get on the plane
in that state.
Smelling like that.
Yeah, and so we get to like mile 26. We're having a good
I thought the campsite looked great.
We're having a great philosophical, religious discussion, And then we're like, we get to this beautiful spot. It's golden hour, but the campsite is tiny. It's like the size of this table, so it would only fit one of our tents, you know?
And we were hoping to go farther than 26 miles. We were thinking, hey, we could do 28 today or something.
Yeah, so we get, we pass this last little campsite and start to descend a lot, and we get down off of this big mountain and cross a road, and then we hit this sign that says... private property next 10 miles, no camping allowed without written permission from landowners, do not stray from the trail, like all this stuff. And we're like, well, we're at mile 28 right now, and we've got 10 miles to where we can camp. We were kind of stressing it. So, and we were also at mile 28, and it was like just about dusk. And then at that same point, we had some weird stuff happen on our maps, like where we came out and crossed the road was a little different than what our map was saying where we would cross the road. So then we're like walking up this hill, not knowing if we're 100% on the trail. Then it gets dark.
Wait, right? No, it did get dark.
It gets dark. Only Tayson pulled out his headlamp, and I was like, yeah, I'll just run off of his borrowed light so I can conserve battery. And then Tayson sees eyes in the bush and realizes it's a skunk, and he just takes off running down the trail. and as I turn and see the skunk, all I see is its butt. So then I really run, and luckily we didn't get sprayed. But then we were just like, where the heck are we gonna camp? Like we were
looking for campsites for a lot of miles.
So yeah, we went probably another like 3 or 4 miles, and we get into this river crossing area, and we had a really beautiful moment, even though we were frustrated because we didn't plan our camping very well, which is an awesome plug for the Far Out app.
Yeah, well, I think after we get through this, we've got to talk about the Far Out Gut Hook app.
Yeah, so but as we come through this little opening in the trees, which was rare, it's really dark, probably like 9:30 or 10 p.m., and we just see like a million lightning bugs just like coming up off the grass, and they're just like, you know, lighting up and then turning off and just sparkling like all around us. So that was cool, even though our feet hurt and we didn't know where we were going to camp. That was a nice little moment.
Yeah, at that point we're like, well, we crossed this road up ahead. We ought to be able to camp there. So
camp on the Yellow Blaze.
We'll camp, yeah. Yeah, Yellow Blaze is a road, for those of you that don't know. That
the White Blaze is the trail.
We found out. So we get out there and we're like, oh, sweet, there's a big like parking lot. We can camp right here. Tyler's ready to just sleep, and I'm like, wait, that sign says no camping.
It's like, why did you look around?
Yeah, he's like, why did you look around? We could have just been asleep. And then there was a sign that said there's a hostel like right up the road. So then we walk, you know.
The sign said ice cream. What else did it say? It said ice cream,
candy bars,
showers,
something like that.
So we're like, dang, if they didn't let us in, this would be fantastic.
So we walk up there, and the business hours were over. It was, you know, because again, we're after 10 p.m., and it's like...
There's a million hiking shoes all around on the deck, so we knew that it was probably full anyways.
We'd heard that people let you camp on the grass for a couple bucks, but we weren't sure. There was no sign, so we decided to not camp there and trespass.
So then we walked another quarter mile back down to the trail, put us right around 29 miles at that point.
We were at 31 miles right there.
Oh, yeah. So then we get back to that, like, area where the trail, the parking lot area, and we're like, okay. So then we walk a little further into trees, and we realize, oh, there's camping allowed right here. And then we realize, oh, there's tents everywhere right here, and everyone's asleep. And we're like... We kind of tried to, like, set up camp.
Tyler was going to set up camp.
I was ready to.
He was done. Tank. I was like, I didn't feel like it was, like I was just going to be too noisy. Like, it's so noisy. Setting up your camp, hammering in stakes into the ground, blowing up your pad.
As a person who was asleep when you guys came in on the Grand Canyon, you guys are way too loud.
Yeah, well, when you go to sleep at 7 p.m., Joe, come on.
Yeah, we didn't feel bad for you on that one.
Yeah. But I felt bad for the group next to us.
Oh, it was the midnight group. No.
Oh,
it was Tyler. Yeah, it was you, Tyler. Yeah. It wasn't
Yeah.
Tayson.
No, so then
ding,
Tayson's
ding.
like, I'm not camping here, and I'm like, I hate you. And
He didn't talk to me for about a half a mile.
so yeah, because we knew from that point on there's a really steep climb, and we're like at mile 31 and a half, and so we're like, all right, I guess we're doing this.
Here.
It got so dumb. So we're like looking at the topo maps on our phones, and we're like, okay, there's a knob right here. Maybe we can camp on that where it looks a little flatter. So we get to the knob, no clear ground, just straight trees everywhere. So then we go to the next little saddle, no clear ground. We get onto the next peak, and there's a shelter full of people, and we're like, holy crap, we're gonna just hike the rest of our hike.
No, you
in the
forgot
night.
about the time that we set our tents up.
No, we passed that shelter before, didn't we?
No.
Okay, so we found a spot that we're like, okay, this will do. It's on this weird little ridge. There was like one spot where people kind of camped often, where it wasn't in the leaves. Then we found this little like group of trees where people do seances. And there's like this
He puts me in a circle of perfectly circled trees. It was eerie. It was eerie.
So Tayson sets up in the spider seance leaf area. I set up in the good spot. Spiders. And then Tayson goes to like hang a bear bag, and he's like, Tyler, I see eyes. And I was like, oh my goodness. So like we go over there, and there's like probably 50 or 60 yards down this steep hill, there's these eyes looking at us from behind a log. And they were like pretty good sized eyes, super bright. And we're like, we had been hearing stuff about the bears constantly. Like everywhere you went, there were signs about bears. There's bear boxes at the shelters. They're really adamant that you use bear hangs if you're not at a shelter. So we're like looking at it, and we're like, is that a bear? We couldn't really tell. It looked like a big animal. We've
got our headlamps on full blast, our phones out, trying to look at. We're moving all around,
and we're like
just
yelling,
staring us down. I'm like yelling at it, hey bear, hey, just staring us dead in the face.
It won't move.
So we sit there and do that for like probably 4 minutes. It felt like, and you can look because I filmed a lot of it on my phone for you, Joe. Tyler takes a big old log, hucks it clear down the hill right at the thing, probably gets within 10 yards of it, doesn't blink, doesn't move, nothing, just ice in the veins. And we're like, that is nothing like the deer in Utah if that's a white-tailed deer, right? Like,
and we had been scaring up white-tailed deer a decent amount while we were going down the trail. So we were like, that does not seem like a deer. That seems like a raccoon or a bear waiting for us to hang our food up so it can come steal our food. Like that. And
it turns its head, and we're like, that's not a raccoon. It's a lot bigger than a raccoon.
Yeah. The distance on the eyes and stuff made it look like a big animal. And so we're like, well, this is stupid. We've been hiking for 16 hours.
We've said that like 50 times. This is the stupidest thing right now. Just having a stare off with some animal in the woods at midnight. At this point, it's midnight.
Yeah. And so then the question became like, well, can you sleep with something lurking 80 yards away from the tent that you know is there? And we kind of like look at each other and we're like, we're really tired. We're like, well, just think, if this is a bear, do we have enough energy to do anything about it if it does come up the hill? We're like, nope. So then we're both kind of like, well, we really don't feel like we'll be very comfortable sleeping here with this animal just lurking, totally unafraid of us. So, like, I already had my top quilt in the tent, like all my clothes out of the dry bag. The tents are set up. It was like my pitch on the tent was perfect. Like, it was going to be a great spot. I just picked up the whole entire tent with all the stuff in it and just jammed it in my pack, and then we just, like, kept walking. We were so pissed off.
We were very pissed off. I mean, because in retrospect, like, and we talked about this quite a bit after, but, like, we were, like, all things considered, it should have been a deer. You know what I mean? Like, the where it was bedded, location on the ridge, like we hunt, right? So like we're very aware of animals. It just tripped us out. I think 1, it's midnight. We're not thinking that clearly. 2, we cannot see it with our lights, which means we got to go closer to the animal before we can see it. 3, in Utah, you throw a rock at a deer or a log at a deer, they wouldn't even stand there and look at you, let alone like you throw something at them. You know what I mean? So it's just different behavior of the deer there. But like all things considered, there's probably a freaking whitetail deer, and we just decided to move. You know what I mean?
My dad actually had a bear tag here in Utah and shot a bear last weekend, and I went and helped him recover it. And I measured the eyes, and I like looked at the eyes from the distance that we were looking down that stupid hill. And I'm embarrassed to say I don't think it was a bear.
Yeah, I don't think it was either. It just was one of those things where it's like, do you think you can sleep? Do you want to walk any closer to it? And do you think you can sleep? And the answer was like no and no. So it was like, I guess we'll just finish the 100 miles tonight.
Well, we really considered just finishing the 100 miles. And then we're like, we'll be at the hostel by 7, and then we could like maybe sleep there or something in the morning. Jeez. You know, and because to get our 100 miles, we're going to have to backtrack this last little section that we were hiking up. And so...
we couldn't get picked up on our original plan, so we ended up having to hike, like, retrace our steps for like 4 miles or something.
Because Brigham didn't want to drive our rental car up a gnarly dirt road.
So we hike off of that hill looking for skunks, looking for animals. We get to a shelter, people everywhere.
No room in the inn.
No room in the inn. So this is now knocking on the door at 1 o'clock in the morning. We go another half mile and we find an excellent...
a terrible campsite. Like literally all it was like a little 7 or 8 foot like space where there was no trees growing right next to the trail, like literally
you could almost
right
trip on my
trail.
tent stake in the trail.
And we're like, this will do. And there's like a fallen log in between, and so like both of our tents are butted up to the log. We're like tying our guy outlines to the log. His guy outlines are like going into my vestibule. Like our tents are so jammed close. And then there's this huge hole under my tent, so I like put all my gear under the hole and then put my pad on top of it and then fell asleep. Like,
yeah,
it was nuts. We slept in a little bit.
We let ourselves sleep in till like 8, but of course at about 6 a.m. we had the birds just going haywire, and we had this stupid bird that went right above our tents, would make this super loud squeaking noise,
I think
and then
it was
bang
on the
its
log.
head against the tree, super loud. I don't know what that thing was, but...
it was like the laziest, loudest woodpecker you'd ever met. Because it only do like one loud peck on the log. But I thought it was on the log in between our tents. The thing was
It
so
sounded
loud.
that loud.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was
So
a
then,
joy, but we did get some extra sleep.
How many miles total in that one?
So that day finished at 33 and a quarter and 68, almost 6,900 feet of climbing. So getting close to 7,000 feet of climbing that day.
the good news was we only had like 3.5 miles left in our trip. So we slept in a little bit. We
basically went down, got water, turned around, and hiked back.
And actually felt pretty good. Like we were pretty surprised that we...
Probably because you were like, well, we just did 33. This ain't nothing.
Well, yeah, really, like, I didn't have any muscle soreness. My feet were tender by then, but no muscle soreness, no real aches or pains. Like, felt like I could have probably kept going if I could give my feet a little bit of a break, you know? So,
for me...
Tayson's knee...
Yeah, so you kind of quit talking about my knee, but essentially my knee did really good on uphills, on flat, on light descents. It was okay, but anything that was like a steeper descent, my knee would just flare up and really hurt. And so I had to really... there were definitely some times I had to slow us down going down the hills. So it was a blessing for sure that we were able to log the 100 miles with my knee the way that it was acting. Thankfully for a lot of the twists and turns and stuff like that on the trail, there wasn't a whole lot of like times when I had to slow us down for my knee, and the pain was pretty manageable. So that part of it was good. I just remember that like the last mile of that was really steep, big step downs and rocky, and I had to just crawl.
Which is what we went up at midnight, remember?
Yeah.
But
yeah, so I just had to crawl that last little bit, and man, I was glad to be done with that by the end of it. So
we found Brigham.
Yep.
We walked up to that hostel and they let us shower for $5 a shower, which was fantastic.
Nice.
Yep. They had soap and towels and slippers for our feet. It was great.
And we met a cool guy from the Air Force who was part of a church group who was organizing a pancake cook trail magic event for the hikers. The trail magic was a cool thing that I wasn't too, like, I didn't realize how much of it there was on the AT, but a lot of people just really like the hikers and want to support them in some way, so they just do things for them. Like, you'll come up on a random shelter and there'll be a bunch of supplies for people to just take as needed. And
most of the hostels or things like that, there was like bins of stuff that were getting donated or like kind of like, you know, leave what you want, take what you want scenarios.
The coolest one, which you'll see in our video, is we came up on this schoolhouse from the late 1800s, and there was a sign that welcomed hikers into the old schoolhouse, and you get in there and there's just bins of supplies for people. And then you got to see the cool historical schoolhouse also. So there's a lot of cool stuff. So
you were able to talk to that guy that morning, though, and it seems like a lot of it, at least where we were at this point in time, was like church sponsored. You know, which was kind of cool. They said there's a lot of people that go out there on trail to kind of find themselves and learn more about themselves. And it seems like inherently when they're spending time in nature, they're asking the big life questions like their purpose and you know, questions about God and stuff like that. And so they seem to go kind of hand in hand. I think a lot of the donation specific money type stuff, like where there's donations bins, they seem to be kind of sponsored by these little local churches. And that hostel we actually went to, he had his own little chapel like built onto there. And
I didn't even see that.
Yeah, he told those guys that they could go check it out when I was waiting for you to in the shower. And
that's why people believed us when we said we were trail missionaries. Like we knew
they didn't bat an eye. They're like, oh yeah, wow.
we knew we looked funny wearing the same shirt and the same pack and the same.
It was better when I had a different color shirt on, but the next day I switched and then we wore the same color shirt.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah, we were just spreading the good word of Outdoor Vitals.
Yeah.
So
propagating the gospel of Outdoor Vitals.
So what stats do you have here for us?
So to finish off the trail, we did 101.1 miles. And we did 20,841 feet of elevation climbing. So, yeah, elevation out there is no joke. It's for real. There's a lot of climbing. But I think to sum it up, oh man, we missed two things here. We got to still talk about the Far Out app, which we'll kind of get to it. But to sum it up, the climbing is a lot, but it felt manageable because it's, you know, climb 700 feet, descend 700 feet, climb 700 feet, descend 700 feet. So you wouldn't burn your legs out. Lower elevation so you could have oxygen was kind of our take on it. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still 25 miles and we felt it. We felt every step of those 25 miles. So it was really interesting. But I know that in the beginning when we were first planning this, I did not expect us to be doing those kind of elevation climbs. Thankfully, we were kind of looking it up and realized that we needed to plan like one extra day on trail because we were thinking like, oh, we could do 30 plus mile days every day until we mapped it out and we're like, oh, all right, we gotta slow it down a little. So, and I think at the end of it too, we're like, we can do 25 mile days, we can do 30 mile days. I think the sweet spot for what I like on trail is to hike somewhere between 20 and 25. So you can take a few more breaks during the day and just slow pace some of those down. But I'd still hike the same schedule, same method. But if you're doing 22 miles a day or 24 miles a day, like you could slow down a little bit more often, take longer lunch breaks, take an afternoon break a little bit longer. And I think those make for a little bit more of an enjoyable experience instead of being a little bit mission driven. The other thing about this is none of that would have happened. That 33 mile day would have not happened if we had the Far Out app, which if you've heard of the Gut Hook app, they've rebranded it to the Far Out app. That is like having a personal guide holding your hand, I swear, every step.
Almost like a concierge, because there's phone numbers in there for hostels and people who will take hikers in. Turtle was telling us, he's like, yeah, there was something in Far Out that said there's this lady in Atkin who takes people in for free. Like they can.
We
just
should
stay.
check if he's still alive, by the way.
That sounded a little sketchy. But he's
so
like,
he texts her and she's like, yeah, we
so
got a
he was
spot.
going to go have a free night at this lady's house, and it was on the app. But it was interesting because on the app, you could click on any landmark and it would tell you your miles to that landmark from where you were at. So people would, everywhere we went, people would be looking at the next water source and they'd be like, okay, next water's 2 miles. I'm only carrying 1 liter. And we're over there carrying 4 liters, And then for campsites too, like Far Out had, Turtle said it was about 90% of the campsites were on there, and the shelters were for sure on there, and it just made planning your day way easier so that you didn't end up doing a 33-miler like we did.
Yeah, they all knew to not do the next mile that we did, because then it turned into, I don't know how many, a lot. So that was really interesting. The other thing that was kind of interesting, like takeaways from the entire trail, is really you're going to be able to get to a city like every couple of days. So you can resupply really often, and that seemed like a really nice aspect of, say, doing the AT versus the PCT or the CDT, where you might have a section that's like 7 or 10 days or something. I don't know, 10 might be excessive, but lots of days between stops, whereas here you're able to get into cities quite frequently. There's shuttles. You got the Far Out app. It tells you, shuttle services. You could just book through the Far Out app essentially, or get the numbers. We did learn that we could have got the section that we hiked in the Far Out app for less money, which would have paid for itself time and time again. So we would recommend that. But yeah, so that's kind of an interesting side of it. And then I think we definitely left the trail just realizing that the AT experience is an extremely social experience. It's just not like hiking out in the West, where you might not see anyone all day long. You know what I mean? There, you're passing people all day long. You're communicating with people all day long. You're latching on and talking to people all day long. You're camping with people. You know what I mean? And so it becomes this very social trail, which was really cool, really different. I think by the end, at the first it felt awkward to us, and by the end it felt like we could kind of embrace it and liked it, and there's definitely some cool pros, I think, to the social aspect.
It's a really unique culture that's kind of built around the trail and by the people who do it, and I think that was the highlight for me, was experiencing that culture and just seeing how people do things and why they do them, and seeing like just how certain thru hikers were very picky about only following the white blazes and doing the AT in its purest form. There was a whole lot of others who were all about the slack packing and grabbing shuttles and doing whatever, and it was cool because people are just out there doing their own thing. You can be social when you want, but you don't have to be, so like that was a really interesting thing.
Like Chip actually, I was just thinking about when we teed off with Chip actually had stayed at a hostel that night, got shuttled up the trail, hiked like a mile on the trail when we met him, and then when we went down through a city, he stayed at a different hostel. So he was which was pretty rare, but he stayed at 2 hostels in a row. Yeah. Which it's like, man.
But he did a big day with us. Like he said, it was one of his only 20-mile days, that he was doing. But he was staying at a llama farm, which sounded interesting.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah,
you just get to hear stories. Like I'm just thinking back to like what Chip did for a living and where he lived, because you just swap in stories the whole time. It's fun because Tyler knows all my stories, right?
Well, now we for sure know all of our stories. Like there's no way around that.
But when Chip comes along, it's like, hey, I can tell some stories again that he hasn't heard. You know what I mean? And just pass the day. So
yeah, and he gave us some good hikes that we need to do up in the Great Lakes area and all of that. So
cool. Yeah. How was the flight back? You smell okay?
Sucked.
The showers at the hostel made sure that we were normal.
We got some good Mexican food, and then we drove down to Charlotte,
I tell you what, the airports are as busy as can be now. That I think it's partially the mask mandates and other things, but it's back. It's rolling at the airports. The flights weren't too bad, but the thing that, like I say, that sucks about living here is then you get to Vegas. You gotta go get your car.
Vegas
and then
is
you've got to
3 miles away or 3 hours away.
So then you got to drive. Yeah, so we got back. I think I went to bed that night or got to my house at 4 a.m. Yeah.
Nice.
So that's the joys of living where we live for sure.
Well, guys, feel free to send us your comments, questions about backpacking, cool outdoor stories, or ideas for future episode topics. If we think it'll bring value to our audience, we will read it out on the show. You can send them by commenting on our Live Ultralight Podcast YouTube channel, or you can send us an email at liveultralightpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I haven't seen an iTunes review for a few weeks. If you could send us a positive iTunes review, we will read that on the show. And just be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Subscribe to our little tiny podcast YouTube channel. I would really appreciate that. And if you want links to any of Outdoor Vital's cool gear, you can check it out down below. We will have a video on the Appalachian Trail experience on our regular YouTube channel, Outdoor Vitals. So go check that out when that comes out. And thank you guys for sitting down with us, and we'll see you next time.